1.
Since today is May 1st, we've arrived at the month of Our Lady. We thought maybe we would share with you some reflections on Our Lady and the history of devotion to her in the church. In the first place, Our Lady was cherished, of course. Jesus saying to the beloved disciple, "Behold your mother," and to her, "Behold your son," was entrusting her to the beloved disciple and to all of us to cherish and to take care of. Devotion to Our Lady in the first place was just people who loved her and who knew her and remembered her, saved souvenirs of her after the time of her passing and her Assumption. Devotion to her really took off, though, a few centuries after her Assumption. It's especially at the Council of Ephesus in the year 431. There was a big meeting of all the bishops in the church because one of the many arguments that broke out at that period in church history was the Patriarch Nestorius of Constantinople, who came from Antioch, a different kind of theological thinking than in the capital. And when he heard everybody in town referring to Our Lady as the God-bearer, the Theotokos, the Mother of God, he said, no, I'm not comfortable with that. She's the Christotokos. She's the one who bore the Christ, not God. And so people were really upset that a traditional devotion like that was being challenged by their bishop. And the long and the short of it is that they ended up having a council to determine which is the more proper title for Our Lady. And the end result was Nestorius was wrong, that it's perfectly okay to call her the Mother of God. And the reason for that is it's the touchstone of the Incarnation, because God loved us so very much that God actually became the baby Jesus. And so the Incarnation of Christ is what it's all about. It's not so much about Our Lady. And from then on, it didn't start there, but devotion to Our Lady took off. There were images of the Madonna and Child throughout the church. Almost always she's holding the Christ child because it's all about Jesus. It's not about her. The Church of St. Mary Major in Rome was built at that time. There were great churches in Constantinople, Jerusalem. And at that time, people began to wonder, they wanted to write down more about Our Lady. There were many traditions about her, but it's for about a 50-year period between 450 and 500 that we have the stories of her death, her dormition, as it's called in the Eastern Church, and her Assumption into heaven, which were traditions that were much older, but now finally they're being written down. Now, I became curious about these traditions because, as you know, in this church, we've been gathering many relics of Our Lady. And some of them that have come our way were relics from Our Lady's hair. Do I know that it's Our Lady's hair? I can't prove it, but throughout history, people have saved the hair of loved ones. My grandmother, my mother, and my sister all had locks of hair that they had passed on through the ages. We have some of Mother Teresa's hair. She gave herself a haircut in New York in 1976, and one of the sisters saved it because they knew she was a saint. So it could be that the tradition of Our Lady's hair is in that mode. Anyway, I looked at all of the stories of the Dormition and the Assumption, and there are many variations, to see if Our Lady left anything to people before she died. It doesn't say about her hair. She did leave clothing that she sent to certain people. And in the world, there are traditional relics of Our Lady that are said to be that clothing. In Chartres Cathedral, her tunic is. In Aachen Cathedral, there's a cloak that she owned. The hair was in the Vatican. The Emperor Charlemagne had some. The Imperial Palace in Constantinople had some, and we have some. The earliest record I can have of anybody with relics of Our Lady's hair is that St. Patrick brought some with him when he came to Ireland in 432. Now that's 1 year after the Council of Ephesus. So it's at the time when everyone's especially thinking about Our Lady and her importance in the church. I'll show you the relics that we have connected with Our Lady. There's a reliquary here that have many different relics. Some of them I've mentioned before, from her cloak, from her tunic, and from her hair. Now, the first relic we got was the crystal that's in the monstrance there. That monstrance came from St. John of God Church on the south side. The crystal, it's hard to see the hair because the crystal kind of blocks the view of it. But if you look in this gold frame, you'll see in that little red circle is some of her hair, and it's a little more visible. It looks almost like a little mustache. One of the depictions we have of Our Lady is the painting of Our Lady of the Grove. When we developed this shrine, we hung it up. It's painted by Courtney Davis, a Celtic artist, in 2000. It's a reproduction of the Crypt Madonna from Chartres Cathedral. Chartres Cathedral was built on the site of the oldest Druid huge grove in Gaul. It was like the Druid Vatican, the pre-Christian religion. And there was a devotion to a mother goddess, she who was about to give birth, that was subsumed into devotion to Our Lady. So one of the images at Chartres Cathedral is the Crypt Madonna, of which this icon is a reproduction. And so she's showed in the picture. Underneath it says Virgo Paritura, the Virgin about to give birth. She's always bringing Christ into the world, again and again. In this time of the pandemic, she's presenting Christ to us in many different ways for our edification, for our being reminded that he's still with us. And you see she's just holding him up. She's a seat of wisdom in this case. And you see that she's seated in the site of the old grove, but you can see part of the cathedral behind her too. She became Our Lady of Morton Grove too, because behind her you see the water parting in two different directions. They remind us of the grove that we have that we're named after, the woods that we have near here, and two branches of the Chicago River. Now, one other item I would like to show you, and it's a pretty extraordinary thing. You see, because of a heresy in the Eastern Church called iconoclasm, for about 125 years, the emperors in Constantinople systematically destroyed all the art in the Eastern Church. Mosaics, icons, pictures, paintings, frescoes. And as a result of all that damage, not one image of the Dormition survived that in the Eastern Church. So it's extraordinary that in the year 2001, there was an excavation in Madabat, Jordan, which is just across the Jordan River from the road to Jerusalem. And they excavated this bronze disc. Now, this shows the Dormition, the moment of death of Our Lady. It was made for the Church of the Dormition in Jerusalem between 500 and 550. So it comes in the first 50 years after the oldest stories of Our Lady's Dormition. Because of iconoclasm, the oldest icons that we had of the Dormition came after the year 838. So this is 300 years older than the oldest known. It's probably the oldest in the world. If you see in the background here, there's a mosaic from Constantinople, from contemporary Istanbul, that shows Our Lady's passing. And what's going on? Christ is holding her soul as though it were a swaddled baby. You see St. Peter here swinging an incenser. St. Paul is on the other side, bending over in grief. St. John is in the middle, bending over in grief. They're all grieving her. You see, she had to die before she could be assumed or should be better than Jesus. So this is the moment of death. You see the same thing here. Peter is on this end swinging an incenser. Paul is there. John is in the middle. Jesus is holding Mary's soul. So it's exactly the same image. And what does it show us? Some of you know that there are two traditional sites for the Dormition and the Assumption of Our Lady, both in Jerusalem and in Ephesus. Now, there's an important tradition that St. John moved to Ephesus. This is where he died, and that he brought Our Lady along. And there's a church in Ephesus that's very lovely. I've been there, and it's filled with the energy of Our Lady. It's a holy place. But the stories about Ephesus come from the 9th century. There's nothing earlier. The stories about Jerusalem are older. The Ephesus tradition, Our Lady and St. John live together, and her Assumption takes place just in the presence of St. John, or perhaps in the presence of no one in particular. In Jerusalem, the apostles are still alive, and she dies and is assumed not long after the crucifixion of Jesus. This is the older tradition, and it's probably the correct one. She probably died and was taken care of in Jerusalem and then assumed into heaven. Now, what does all of this tell us who are struggling with this pandemic? First of all, after Jesus died, they took care of his mother. They cherished Our Lady. They loved her as they loved him. They gave her whatever she needed to get by, and they kept her close. And when the time came for her to die, they grieved her. They surrounded her with love. She was able to let go because in the story she's giving things away to other people, so she sensed her time was coming. And she had no fear. She knew Jesus would take care of her. And they felt the same way. So they entrusted her to the Lord, and they entrust her to us as our mother to inspire us to take care of one another during this time when we're all confined to our homes. Cherish one another. Do whatever you can to help each other know that you're appreciated. If any of us are lost in this pandemic, and indeed it may happen, we entrust them to the Lord. But in the meanwhile, we take care of each other as much as we can, and we're grateful for those who are doing all they can to help keep us going. God bless you.